In the quiet of our kitchen, the ticking of the wall clock was a stark reminder of the routine life Ethan and I had built over the years. I, Meredith Blake, at 34, had juggled my roles as a marketing executive and a mother with what I believed was finesse. Ethan, Zoe, and I were the picture of suburban bliss, or so I thought. "Ethan, can we talk about your spending again?" I asked, my voice steady despite the frustration bubbling beneath. He looked up from his phone, his brow furrowing. "Meredith, you're not going to start this again, are you? It's just a few bucks here and there." "It's every month, Ethan, and it's not just a few bucks." "I'm worried," I pressed on, trying to keep the peace. Ethan sighed, setting his phone down with a theatrical flourish. "Look, I get it. You're the one with the big job, the big paycheck, but can't a guy enjoy life a bit? It's not like we're struggling." I bit back a sharper retort, choosing my words carefully. "I'm not saying you shouldn't, but maybe focus on that promotion you mentioned. We could really plan for the future then." He chuckled, a sound that once charmed me but now felt hollow. "Always so serious, Meredith. Fine, I'll focus on the promotion. Happy?" I wasn't, but I let it slide. Again, our life continued in its usual rhythm until that fateful sunny morning. Ethan and Zoe, my heart and soul, were off for a day out, leaving me to my weekend workload. Waving them goodbye, I felt a twinge of guilt for not joining them, but pushed it aside. Work was my excuse, my shield. Then came the call that shattered everything. "Mrs. Blake?" An unfamiliar voice, somber and heavy, broke through the silence of my home office. "Yes, speaking. Is everything okay?" My heart raced, a premonition of dread settling in. "I'm afraid there's been an accident involving your husband and your daughter," the voice continued, and the world around me blurred. "What? How? Are they okay? Please tell me they're okay." Panic clawed at my throat, each breath a struggle. "Your husband sustained minor injuries. He's stable. But your daughter, she's in emergency surgery. It's serious." Emergency surgery. The words echoed in my mind, a relentless torment. I couldn't breathe, think, or move. Zoe, my vibrant, sweet Zoe, in surgery because of what? An accident? How? I stumbled through the motions, informing my boss, driving to the hospital, a numb automaton driven by a single thought: Zoe. The hospital was a blur of white walls and hushed voices. I barely registered the words of the doctors, the sympathetic glances of the nurses. All I could focus on was the door to the operating room where my daughter fought for her life. And then my phone rang, a jarring melody in the silence of my despair. Glancing at the caller ID, I saw it was Ethan's parents' number. "Hello." My voice was a whisper, the effort to speak monumental. "Hey, Mom," chirped a voice, bright and unburdened. Zoe's voice. Confusion reigned. "Zoe? But how? You're supposed to be in surgery?" she finished, her laughter tinkling through the line. "Nope, I'm at Grandma and Grandpa's. Dad dropped me off this morning. Didn't he tell you?" The room spun. If Zoe was safe, then who was in that operating room? "Zoe, honey, I have to go. I'll call you back, okay?" "Okay, Mom. Love you." "Love you too," I whispered, the words heavy with a confusion and relief so profound it hurt. I turned back to the hospital, to the chaos of emotions waiting within. The mystery of the girl in the operating room loomed over me, a shadow threatening the very foundation of our lives. As I stepped back into the sterile light of the hospital, I knew one thing for certain: our lives would never be the same again. As I navigated the corridors back to the operating room, the pieces of this perplexing puzzle refused to align. The revelation that Zoe was safe, miles away from this sterile environment, offered a breath of relief smothered by a new, growing dread. Who, then, was the girl lying vulnerable on the operating table? I found Ethan in a private room, his injuries seemingly minor. The sight of him, so carefree amidst the chaos, ignited a fire within me I hadn't known existed. "Ethan," I began, my voice calm but cold, "if Zoe is with your parents, who was in the car with you?" Ethan's expression faltered, the carelessness giving way to panic. It was just a friend of Zoe's. We were giving her a lift." "A friend?" I echoed, skepticism lacing my words. "And her parents? Were they aware she was with us?" He avoided my gaze, his discomfort palpable. "Yes, of course. I called them. They know." The lies were too thin, too fragile. My heart raced, not just with anger, but with a sense of betrayal so deep it threatened to engulf me. "Ethan, I need the truth. Now," I demanded, stepping closer. He winced, the facade crumbling. Okay, it was Hannah, Zoe's classmate. Her mom and I, we've been..." The confession hung in the air, a tangible, suffocating fog. Ethan's affair, hidden beneath layers of deceit, now laid bare. But it was the casualty of this illicit connection that shook me to my core. You risked our daughter's safety, our family, for an affair? My voice was a whisper, a mix of disbelief and fury. Ethan's attempts at justification were drowned out by the roar of betrayal in my ears. I left him there, in his room of lies, the weight of his deceit pressing down on me. My next steps were mechanical, driven by a need for confirmation, for truth amidst the web of lies. The hospital staff directed me to Hannah's parents, where I was met with a scene of despair. Hannah's mother, a woman I recognized from school events but never truly knew, was a reflection of my own turmoil. I'm Meredith, Zoe's mom, I introduced myself, the words tasting bitter. Hannah, she's in surgery because of Ethan? Her voice broke, a mirror to my heart. Yes, I had no idea about any of this. I admitted, the shame of my ignorance a heavy cloak. The conversation that followed was a blur of apologies and assurances, but one thing was clear. Ethan's actions had consequences far beyond our family. The damage was done, irrevocably altering the lives of all involved. As I left the hospital that day, the clarity of my resolve crystallized with each step. Ethan's betrayal was not just a violation of our vows, but a danger to our daughter and others. This deception would not go unanswered. I needed to act, not just for my sake, but for Zoe, for Hannah, for every innocent life touched by Ethan's selfishness. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with pain and legal battles, but one thing was sure. Ethan would face the consequences of his actions. The drive home was a journey of determination. With each mile, I shed the remnants of the woman who once believed in the facade of our perfect life. In her place emerged someone stronger, fueled by a righteous anger and a fierce protectiveness over her daughter. Ethan's deception had shattered our family, but from the ruins I vowed to rebuild, stronger and wiser. The truth was my weapon, and with it, I would ensure justice was served. The following days were a whirlwind of activity, each action deliberate, aimed at uncovering the full extent of Ethan's betrayal. I moved with a clarity of purpose, fueled by the betrayal that had upended our lives. I started by securing legal counsel, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer named Diane who specialized in family law. She listened intently as I laid out everything, from Ethan's requests for money to the accident and his affair. We'll need concrete evidence if you want to pursue this in court, Diane advised, her tone serious but not without empathy. Bank statements, communications between Ethan and the other woman, anything that can substantiate your claims. Armed with Diane's advice, I turned my attention to gathering the necessary proof. I delved into our financial records, uncovering a pattern of withdrawals and expenses that now made sickening sense. Each transaction was a breadcrumb leading back to Ethan's deceit. But it was the discovery of Ethan's old phone, discarded in a drawer, that proved to be the linchpin. Powered on, it revealed a treasure trove of messages and photos that painted a vivid picture of his infidelity. With each piece of evidence collected, my resolve hardened. Ethan had not only endangered our daughter's well-being, but had shattered the trust and safety of our family unit. His actions demanded consequences. It was during this period of meticulous planning that Ethan, oblivious to the storm brewing, attempted to reach out. "Meredith, we need to talk about Zoe. And us," he pleaded over the phone, his voice laced with a desperation that once might have moved me. "Us? There is no us, Ethan. Not anymore," I replied, my voice steady, devoid of the warmth he was accustomed to. "But Meredith, You what, Ethan? You're sorry?" I cut him off, my patience for his excuses long gone. "Save it. I'm speaking to you through my lawyer from now on." The line went dead, a symbolic end to any remnants of our relationship. My next steps were clear, each action calculated to protect Zoe and ensure Ethan faced the full repercussions of his actions. I met with Diane again, armed with the evidence and a steely determination. "We file for divorce," I stated, no trace of doubt in my voice. "And I want full custody of Zoe. He's proven he can't be trusted with her safety." Diane nodded, her expression resolute. "I'll prepare the papers. We'll also go after him for child support and alimony. With this evidence, we have a strong case." As I left Diane's office, the weight of my decisions weighed heavily on me. Yet the path forward was clear. Ethan's betrayal had irrevocably altered the course of our lives. but I would do whatever it took to ensure Zoe's future was secure and happy. The battle lines were drawn, and while the road ahead promised to be fraught with challenges, I was ready. Ready to confront Ethan, to protect Zoe, and to reclaim our lives from the ruins of his deceit. The legal proceedings began with a precision that mirrored my newfound resolve. Diane filed the divorce papers, and we prepared for the initial court hearing. The evidence we gathered was damning, a silent testament to Ethan's betrayal and negligence. As the court date approached, Ethan attempted reconciliation, his messages oscillating between apologies and accusations. But I had shut the door on that chapter of our life, my focus solely on securing Zoe's future. On the day of the hearing, the courthouse loomed large, a symbol of the justice I sought. Ethan was already there, looking diminished, a far cry from the confident man I once knew. "Meredith, please, can we not do this here?" he pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper as we waited outside the courtroom. "Do what, Ethan?" "Face the consequences of your actions," I replied, my gaze steady on him. "This is exactly where we need to be." He shook his head, the facade of contrition slipping as he hissed, "You're blowing this out of proportion. It was just a mistake." "A mistake?" The words were sharp, laced with disbelief. "You endangered our daughter, Ethan. You destroyed our family for an affair. This is the consequence of your actions, not an overreaction." Before he could respond, Diane appeared, her presence a calming force. "It's time," she said, ushering me away from Ethan and towards the courtroom. Inside, the proceedings were a blur, the judge's voice a distant echo as the reality of the situation settled over me. Diane was relentless, presenting the evidence of Ethan's affair and financial irresponsibility with clinical precision. Ethan's lawyer attempted to mitigate the damage, arguing for leniency and shared custody. But the evidence spoke louder than any of his pleas, painting a picture of a man who had not only been unfaithful, but had recklessly endangered his child. When the judge finally spoke, his words were a balm to the wounds Ethan had inflicted. "Given the evidence presented, I am granting Miss Blake full custody of Zoe. Mr. Blake will have supervised visitation rights until further notice. As for financial support, given the circumstances and Mr. Blake's actions, he will provide child support and alimony." The gavel's finality marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of a new, uncertain path. Ethan's face, pale and defeated, was the last I saw before turning away, Diane's reassuring presence guiding me out of the courtroom. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, as if the weight of the past months had been lifted, if only slightly. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was a glimmer of hope. Ethan's voice broke through the haze of my thoughts. "Meredith, wait, please." I stopped, turning to face him, the man I no longer recognized. "There's nothing left to say, Ethan. You have your consequences to face, and I have our daughter to protect." With that, I walked away, the echo of my steps a testament to the strength I had found in the face of betrayal. Ethan's attempts at reconciliation were left unanswered, a chapter firmly closed as I focused on building a future for Zoe and me, free from the shadows of his deceit. In the weeks following the court's decision, the reality of our new lives began to take shape. Ethan's fall from grace was rapid, his actions laid bare for all to see. The community, once a shared space of friendships and gatherings, became a battleground of whispers and judgment aimed at Ethan. I focused on Zoe, ensuring she felt as little of the fallout as possible. But children are perceptive, and she sensed the change, her bright demeanor shadowed by the events unfolding around her. It was during one of our afternoon walks, a time we had designated for open conversations, that Zoe's resilience shone through, her words cutting to the heart of the matter. "Mom, why is Dad not around anymore?" she asked, her innocent eyes searching mine for answers. I knelt down, taking her hands in mine, the weight of the conversation pressing down. "Honey, your dad made some choices that weren't good for us. Right now, it's important we focus on being safe and happy together." Zoe nodded, a maturity beyond her years settling over her features. "Is Dad sad?" "Yes, sweetie, he is. But it's important he understands his actions have consequences," I explained, hoping to instill in her a sense of right and wrong, shaped not by bitterness but by understanding. Zoe hugged me, her small arms a testament to the strength we had found together. "I love you, Mom. We're okay, just us two." I love you too, Zoe. Yes, we are, I affirmed, my heart swelling with love and determination for my daughter's future. As we continued our walk, I thought about Ethan's attempts to contact us. Each call, each message, was a plea for understanding, a plea I could not afford to heed. His actions had set this course, and the consequences were his to bear. It wasn't long before the financial repercussions of Ethan's choices became apparent. His job, once a source of pride, became untenable amidst the scandal. Child support and alimony payments began to strain his resources, a constant reminder of the responsibilities he had tried to escape. One day as I opened the mail, I found a letter from Ethan, different from the others. It was an apology, not just to me, but to Zoe, an acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. I read it, the words blurring as emotions conflicted within me. It was the first step, perhaps, towards genuine remorse. But the path to forgiveness, if it was to be found, would be long and fraught with the memories of his betrayal. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Diane, documents in hand, a look of resolve on her face. Meredith, we've got a bit more to sort through. Ethan's falling behind on the payments. It's time to enforce the court's decision, she stated, her voice firm. I nodded, the reality of our situation settling in. Let's do what we need to, Diane. For Zoe. As Diane outlined the next steps, I realized this was but another chapter in the long road ahead. Ethan's downfall, brought on by his own actions, was a cautionary tale, one I hoped Zoe would learn from, but never have to experience firsthand. Our journey was far from over, but with each step I felt the resilience and love between Zoe and me growing stronger, a beacon guiding us through the aftermath of Ethan's choices. In the aftermath of our legal victories, life began to settle into a new rhythm, one where the absence of Ethan's presence became the norm rather than the exception. Zoe adapted with a resilience that amazed me, her laughter returning to fill the spaces of our home that had once been shadowed by conflict. It was during one of our weekend retreats, a small cabin by the lake where we'd found solace in the simplicity of nature, that Zoe broached the subject of her father once more. "Mom, do you think Dad is okay?" she asked one evening, the sunset casting golden hues across the water. I paused, considering her question. "I think your dad has a lot of things to figure out, Zoe, but we've got each other, and that's what matters." Zoe nodded, a wisdom in her acceptance. "I just wish he understood how much he hurt us," she said softly. Her words echoed my own sentiments, a reflection of the journey we'd embarked upon. "Me too, sweetheart, but we're moving forward, and that's what counts." Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of my phone ringing, a call from Diane that I had been anticipating. I stepped away, answering with a quiet hello. "Meredith, it's Diane. I have news. Ethan's been held accountable for the missed payments. The court's enforced a lien on his assets. It's a significant step towards ensuring Zoe's future is secure," she informed me, her voice steady and reassuring. A wave of relief washed over me, tempered by the knowledge of what this meant for Ethan. "Thank you, Diane. This is good news. For Zoe," I replied, my thoughts on my daughter, who watched me from a distance. Returning to Zoe, I shared the news in terms we had come to understand, a language of moving forward and healing. "Zoe, we're going to be okay. We've got a bit more security now, thanks to the court's decision." Zoe smiled, her understanding clear. "I know, Mom. I'm glad, but I'm okay as long as I have you." The weekend passed in a blend of conversations and quiet moments, each reinforcing the bond between us, a testament to the strength we'd found in the face of adversity. Back home, the reality of our situation continued to unfold, but with each passing day, the shadows of Ethan's choices grew fainter, replaced by the light of our resilience and determination to build a life defined not by what we had lost, but by what we had gained. Zoe's progress at school, my advancements at work, and the support of friends and family painted a picture of a future bright with possibility. Ethan, for all the turmoil he had caused, became a footnote in our story, a reminder of the challenges we had overcome. As I tucked Zoe into bed one night, her words filled me with a sense of hope and purpose. "Mom, we're like a team, right? Against the world?" I smiled, kissing her forehead. "Yes, Zoe, against the world and winning." Our journey was a testament to the power of love and resilience, a narrative shaped not by the betrayal we had endured, but by the strength we had discovered within ourselves. Ethan's downfall was his own making, a path chosen through deceit and disregard. But for Zoe and me, the path we walked was one of healing, of justice, and ultimately of triumph. The end of our story was not an end at all, but a beginning, a new chapter filled with the promise of joy, growth, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her daughter.
My greedy husband used my $300,000 inheritance to secure his own future, while leaving me stranded. He secretly sold the house where I was caring for my paralyzed father-in-law, laughing as he declared, "You both are now homeless." To add insult to injury, he threw divorce papers in my face, shattering the life I thought we had built together. The very next day, when lawyers approached me with legal documents, I was left in shock, my world crumbling around me. How could everything I trusted slip away so quickly? I'm Sophia, a graphic designer in my late 30s, and I want to share my story with you. Life has taken unexpected turns, some that left me feeling on top of the world, and others that brought me to my knees. After my parents passed away, I inherited a decent amount of money, which made my life in Austin, Texas, quite comfortable. I had my own apartment filled with sunlight and colorful artwork that I loved to create. Financially, I was secure, but emotionally, I was searching for something or someone to fill the void. That's where my best friend, Maya, came into the picture. She's in her 30s and has always been obsessed with astrology. She'd tell me how the stars aligned and how they could predict our futures. I was skeptical, but also a bit curious. One evening over coffee, she leaned in with excitement. "Sophia, I have to tell you about this guy I found in your chart. His name is Ryan, and he's your perfect match." I raised an eyebrow, amused. "Oh, really? Is he a prince or a movie star?" Maya laughed, undeterred by my teasing. "No, he's a regular guy, but the stars say you two are meant to be together. Just trust me. You need to meet him." After some coaxing, I reluctantly agreed to meet Ryan, half expecting a weird guy who would talk about constellations all night. To my surprise, when I met him, he was charming and down-to-earth. He had an easy smile, a great sense of humor, and a love for hiking and indie films, just like me. We started seeing each other regularly, and I felt something spark between us. It was exhilarating, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. After a few months, Ryan and I became a couple. Things moved quickly, and before I knew it, he convinced me to invest my inheritance into his home, persuading me to pay off his $300,000 mortgage. "Think about it, Sophia," he said, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "If we're going to build a life together, we need a solid foundation. This house can be ours." I hesitated but ultimately agreed, swept up in the whirlwind of romance. I thought I was making a sound investment in our future. Little did I know, my trust would soon be put to the test. The first few months in the house were blissful. We decorated together, and I loved creating art for the walls. Ryan and I often took weekend trips to the nearby hills, enjoying nature and each other's company. But soon, life threw us a curveball. Ryan's father, Thomas, was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare condition that left him paralyzed. The news hit us hard, and I felt a wave of sympathy for Ryan and his family. I offered my support without hesitation. "Ryan, let's figure this out together," I said one evening as we sat on the couch. "Your dad needs help, and we can do this." "Thanks, Sophia. It means a lot," he replied, looking grateful but worried. As Thomas needed constant care, I decided to move in with Ryan's family to help out. I thought it was the right thing to do. Ryan's mother, Brenda, was in her 60s and suffered from chronic arthritis. She became increasingly demanding, making it hard for me to focus on my graphic design work while also caring for Thomas. "Can you do this? Can you get me that?" Brenda would ask, her tone sharp, her frustration palpable. "Yes, I'm working on it," I would respond, trying to stay calm. But it was challenging. I felt overwhelmed, trying to juggle my job and Thomas's care. I even took a short course in physical therapy techniques to help him regain some movement. "Just a little more," I would say to Thomas during our sessions, trying to encourage him. "You can do it." Over time, Thomas started to show signs of improvement. He regained slight movement in his fingers and began to speak a few words. Each small victory felt monumental, but my efforts often went unnoticed by Brenda. One evening, after a long day of caring for Thomas and dealing with Brenda's constant complaints, I finally snapped. "Brenda, I'm trying my best here. I'm doing this for your husband and for Ryan. Can't you see that?" Brenda just rolled her eyes. "You should be more focused on taking care of him instead of sitting around. It's not like you have a real job anymore." I felt my heart sink. I was trying to help a family in need, but all I received were criticisms. Yet, I remained committed to Thomas, who, despite his struggles, was grateful for my support. I could see the warmth in his eyes every time I made progress with him. Months passed, and finally, Brenda announced she needed a break. "I'm going to stay with Ryan for a while," she said one morning, packing her bags. "I can't take this place anymore." Relief washed over me. "That's great, Brenda. I hope it helps you." As she left, I turned to Thomas. "It's just us now, buddy. We can make some real progress," I said, smiling at him. He blinked slowly in response, and I knew he understood. It was a fresh start for both of us, but little did I know, shadows loomed ahead. The days turned into weeks, and I became more focused on helping Thomas regain his strength. We worked on exercises every morning, and I learned more about his condition and how to assist him better. However, I started noticing changes in Ryan. He seemed distant and preoccupied. "Hey, is everything okay?" I asked him one night after dinner. "Yeah, just work stuff," he replied, but I could sense something was off. As we tried to navigate our new reality, I had no idea that the biggest challenge was yet to come. The feeling of unease clung to me like a shadow, and soon, everything I thought I knew would be turned upside down. As the weeks passed, I found comfort in my routine with Thomas. We shared quiet moments in the garden, and I could see the determination in his eyes as he worked to regain his strength. It felt good to help him, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was making a real difference in someone's life. But beneath that comfort, a nagging feeling of unease began to grow within me. One evening, while I was busy working on a graphic design project, my phone buzzed. It was Ryan. "Can we talk?" the message read. My stomach nodded as I sensed something was wrong. "Sure, when?" I replied. "Now," he said. I quickly finished up and made my way to the living room. Ryan was sitting on the couch, looking more serious than I had ever seen him. "Sophia, there's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice low. "Okay, what's going on?" I asked, my heart racing. He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "My dad, he's not getting better. The doctors are saying he may not recover fully. I just can't handle this anymore." "I understand that it's hard," I said gently, "but we're doing our best. You have me here, and we're making progress." "Yeah, but I need more. I need to focus on myself for a while, and I can't keep doing this." "I think I need to sell the house," he said, avoiding my gaze. "Sell the house? But Ryan, we've invested so much in this place. This is our home." I protested. He looked up at me, his eyes cold. "It's not just a house anymore. It's a burden. I can't keep pretending everything is fine." "Fine," I said, my voice shaking. "But what about your dad? He needs you." Ryan stood up, anger flaring in his eyes. "Don't you get it? I'm not his caregiver. I can't keep sacrificing my life for him." I felt a wave of frustration and fear wash over me. "You can't just abandon him. He's your father. Just think about it, Sophia," he shot back before leaving the room. The conversation left me rattled. I couldn't understand how Ryan could be so dismissive of his own father's needs. My resolve to support Thomas grew stronger, but I also felt increasingly isolated. The next day, I continued to work with Thomas, who had become my confidant. One afternoon, while we were sitting in the sun, he looked at me intently. "Sophia, I need to tell you something," he said slowly, his voice gaining strength. I leaned closer, eager to hear what he had to say. "What is it, Thomas?" "I overheard Ryan and Brenda," he whispered. "They were talking about how they plan to take advantage of you. They think you're just a means to an end." My heart dropped. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I was in a room when they thought I couldn't hear. They mentioned something about your inheritance and how they could use it to their advantage, he explained, his brow furrowed in concern. I shook my head in disbelief. That doesn't make any sense. Ryan wouldn't do that to me. He might not see it that way, Thomas said, looking me straight in the eye. But you need to be careful. I didn't want to believe it either, but sometimes people show their true colors when faced with tough times. As I absorbed Thomas's words, a knot of dread twisted in my stomach. Could Ryan really be planning something against me? I thought back to his recent behavior, his distance, his unwillingness to talk about his father. It all began to make sense in a way I wished it didn't. I resolved to confront Ryan about what Thomas had told me. That evening, as we sat across from each other at the dining table, I summoned all my courage. Ryan, I need to talk to you about something important, I began. Can it wait? I'm really not in the mood, he replied, looking down at his plate. No, it can't wait. I heard something from your dad, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. His eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Thomas told me he overheard you and Brenda discussing plans to use my inheritance. Is that true? Ryan's expression changed. His face went pale. That's ridiculous. My dad doesn't know what he's talking about. Why would he make that up? You've been acting distant lately. What's really going on? I pressed, refusing to back down. Nothing. I'm just stressed out, he snapped, pushing his chair back. I can't deal with this right now, Sophia. Then what can you deal with, Ryan? Because I feel like I'm in this alone, I said, my voice trembling. He stood up, fists clenched, and walked out of the room. I can't do this, he muttered. I felt my heart sink as I realized the conversation hadn't gone anywhere. Doubt filled my mind, and the seed of betrayal was planted deep within me. As I sat alone at the table, the walls felt like they were closing in. I could sense that my world was about to unravel, and I had no idea how to stop it. Days turned into a blur of worry and tension, but I remained committed to Thomas. I didn't want to believe Ryan could be capable of such betrayal. Yet every time I glanced at my phone, a sense of dread washed over me. The shadows were creeping in, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the brink of something I wasn't prepared for. It was a strange mix of anxiety and determination that filled my days as I continued to help Thomas. I poured my heart into his recovery, hoping to make a difference while grappling with my suspicions about Ryan. Despite my growing unease, I tried to push thoughts of betrayal to the back of my mind, focusing instead on the little victories we were achieving together. One afternoon, as we practiced Thomas's physical therapy exercises, I noticed him struggling to lift his arm. Come on, Thomas, you can do it, I encouraged, gripping his arm gently to guide him. With a determined look, he gave it his all, and his fingers finally curled around a small object I had placed on the table. Good job. That's it. I cheered, feeling a rush of pride. Thomas smiled weakly, his eyes lighting up. Thanks, Sophia. I couldn't have done this without you, he said, his voice steadier than before. Just then, the front door creaked open and Ryan walked in, looking exhausted. What's going on here? He asked, eyeing the scene suspiciously. Just helping your dad with some exercises, I replied, trying to keep my tone light. Yeah, well, don't tire him out too much. He needs rest, Ryan said, a hint of irritation in his voice. I felt a pang of frustration. We're making progress, Ryan. It's important for his recovery. He shrugged, clearly uninterested. Whatever, he muttered, heading into the kitchen. I exchanged a worried glance with Thomas. His expression mirrored my concern. Sophia, I think you need to prepare yourself, he said quietly after Ryan left the room. Prepare for what? I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. I just have a bad feeling about Ryan. If he's truly thinking about selling the house, you need to be ready for what that might mean for you, Thomas said, his tone serious. The weight of his words sank in. I didn't want to think about it, but deep down, I knew he was right. I couldn't shake the feeling that the foundation of my life was beginning to crumble. The last thing I wanted was to lose everything I had worked for, especially my relationship with Thomas, who had become like family to me. Later that week, I returned to our home after running errands, only to find the living room in disarray. Boxes were scattered everywhere, and Ryan was packing up his belongings. "What's going on?" I asked, my heart racing. "I'm just getting things organized," Ryan said curtly, avoiding eye contact. "Organized for what? Are you seriously packing?" I pressed, feeling a surge of panic. "Just a few things for the sale," he said casually. "Sale? You can't be serious, Ryan. You're really going through with it?" I exclaimed, disbelief flooding my voice. "Look, Sophia, this is for the best. I need to take control of my life," he snapped, finally meeting my gaze. "This isn't just your life, Ryan. It's ours. You can't sell the house without even discussing it with me." I felt the anger rising within me. I invested my inheritance into this place. "Maybe it was a mistake," he retorted, crossing his arms defensively. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're throwing everything away. What about your dad? What about us?" Ryan shook his head, frustration evident on his face. "You don't get it. I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending everything is fine. It's exhausting." "Exhausting? Try being the one caring for your father while you sit here and make plans to abandon him." I shot back, tears welling in my eyes. "Stop acting like you're the only one who cares," he yelled, the tension in the room palpable. With that, Ryan stormed out of the house, leaving me standing there in shock. The reality of what was happening hit me like a wave. I felt betrayed and alone, and the man I had trusted was now a stranger. The next morning, I returned to Thomas's room, where he was waiting for me. "What happened?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. "Ryan wants to sell the house. He doesn't care about what we've built here, or how much it means to me. He's giving up on everything." Thomas looked solemn. "You need to think about your future, Sophia. You can't allow him to dictate your life. You deserve better." His words resonated deeply within me. I realized then that I had to reclaim my life. I had to take a stand, not just for myself, but for Thomas, who had become my ally in this battle. With renewed determination, I decided it was time to confront Ryan once and for all. I needed to find out if his intentions were truly as selfish as they seemed. My heart raced at the thought of what lay ahead, but I knew I couldn't back down now. The shadows were closing in, and I was ready to face whatever darkness awaited me. The air in the house felt thick with tension as I prepared to confront Ryan. My heart raced with a mix of anxiety and determination. I knew I had to stand up for myself and for Thomas. As I approached Ryan, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "Ryan, we need to talk," I said, finding him in the living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes. He glanced up, irritation flickering in his eyes. "What now?" I swallowed hard. "I can't let you sell the house without discussing it with me. This is our home, not just an investment. I deserve to know what you're really planning." He crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. "I told you this is for my own good. You have no idea how trapped I feel. I can't keep living like this." "Trapped? What about your father? He needs you now more than ever, and you're just going to walk away?" I challenged, my voice rising. "You're abandoning him." Ryan's expression hardened. "I can't be responsible for him anymore. I didn't sign up for this." I felt a surge of anger. "And I did? I've been here for him, when you couldn't be. You think you can just sell this house and leave without any consequences?" "Consequences?" he scoffed. "What do you mean?" "Ryan, I invested my inheritance into this place. You're not just hurting me, you're hurting your father. If you go through with this, I will fight you for what's right," I declared, feeling the fire within me grow stronger. His face paled at my words. "You wouldn't dare," he shot back, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Try me," I said, unwavering. "This is not just about money. It's about loyalty, about family. You need to decide what kind of person you want to be." Ryan remained silent, the tension hanging between us like a heavy fog. Finally, he dropped his gaze to the floor, his shoulders slumping. "I don't know what to do," he admitted quietly. "Then let's figure it out together. We can find a way to support your dad without throwing everything away," I said gently. but you need to meet me halfway." He looked up, his expression softening. "I'm scared, Sophia. I don't want to lose everything, but I don't know how to handle this." "We'll handle it together. I'm not going anywhere," I reassured him, feeling a flicker of hope. In that moment, I realized that we both needed to grow. It was time for Ryan to face his responsibilities, and it was time for me to reclaim my life, no matter how messy things got. As the days turned into weeks, we worked together to support Thomas's recovery. Ryan began to show signs of commitment, balancing his own fears with the needs of his father. It wasn't easy, but we learned to communicate better and find strength in our shared goal. One evening, as we sat in the living room, I noticed the warmth returning to Ryan's eyes. "Thank you for not giving up on me," he said, breaking the silence. "I didn't realize how much I needed you until I almost lost you." I smiled, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. We're in this together. Family doesn't just mean blood. It's about being there for each other. The months rolled on, and Thomas continued to improve. He was now able to move around the house with some assistance, and had even started sharing stories from his past, filling our lives with laughter and memories. Our bond deepened, and I felt grateful for the unexpected role I had taken in his life. As for Ryan and me, we began to rebuild our relationship. We found joy in simple moments, whether it was cooking dinner together or watching movies on the couch. The shadows that had once loomed over us began to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of hope. One day, as we sat together in the garden, Ryan turned to me, his expression serious. "Sophia, I want to make things official. I don't want to lose you again." "Are you proposing?" I asked, surprised. He nodded, pulling out a simple ring from his pocket. "I know it's been a rocky road, but I believe we can face anything together." Tears filled my eyes as I nodded, accepting the ring. "Yes, of course. I want to build a future with you." In that moment, I realized that life's hardships had taught me valuable lessons about trust, resilience, and personal growth. I had reclaimed my life, not just for myself, but for those I loved. As we embraced, I felt stronger than ever, ready to face whatever challenges the future held, hand in hand.
My name is Anna, and that morning was anything but peaceful. As the first wave of pain hit me, a sharp, stark reminder that our baby was on its way, I called out to my husband, Mark. "Mark, it's time," I gasped, clutching my swollen belly. He stumbled into the room, his eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. Okay, let's go," he muttered, helping me to my feet. But before we could take another step, his phone rang. It was his mother, Evelyn. Despite my increasingly intense contractions, Mark answered the phone. "Mom? Now?" He hesitated, glancing at me with an apologetic look. I couldn't believe it. My husband, the man who had promised to be by my side through thick and thin, was considering abandoning me at this crucial moment. "Mark, please," I pleaded. "We need to go to the hospital." He nodded distractedly, murmuring a response to his mother. "Yes, Mom, I know, but Anna is in labor." The conversation seemed endless. With each passing second, my discomfort grew, both physically and emotionally. I felt a betrayal building, a stark realization that I was not his priority. Finally, Mark ended the call, his expression torn. "Anna, I have to drop Mom first. She has her weekly art class." I stared at him, incredulous. "Are you serious? Your child is about to be born." "I'm sorry, Anna," he mumbled, pulling out his wallet. "Here, take this." He handed me a $20 bill as if it could somehow compensate for his absence. Before I could protest, he was gone, the sound of the car engine fading into the distance. Left alone, pain surging through me, I felt a wave of despair. Our marriage, once a canvas of love and mutual respect, now seemed like a forgotten sketch, overshadowed by Evelyn's overbearing presence. I had met Mark in college, a charming senior who won my heart with his kind words and gentle demeanor. Our relationship blossomed, and soon after graduation, we married. Those days now seemed like a distant memory, a stark contrast to the cold reality of my current predicament. Evelyn, Mark's mother, had always been a challenging figure in our lives. Initially, I tried to see past her harsh words, believing it to be typical mother-in-law behavior. But over time, her true nature became apparent. She was manipulative, always finding ways to wedge herself between Mark and me. I remember our first meeting. Her eyes had scanned me critically, her lips curling in distaste. "What's with your hair, dear? Trying a bit too hard, aren't we?" I had felt so small, so judged. Mark had tried to brush it off, claiming she was just nervous. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Her words were always laced with venom, her actions a clear indication of her desire to control every aspect of Mark's life. And now, as I stood alone in our living room, struggling with labor pains, I realized the extent of her hold over him. It was a revelation that stung sharply, a realization that I was secondary in my husband's life. As the pain intensified, a sense of urgency overcame me. I needed to get to the hospital, with or without Mark. I dialed a taxi, my hands trembling, tears streaming down my face. I was about to bring our child into the world, and I was doing it alone. The taxi arrived quickly, and as I stepped out of the house, I took one last look back. It was a bittersweet farewell to the life I thought I had, a life overshadowed by a woman who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to her son's undivided attention. In the back seat of the taxi, as we sped towards the hospital, I made a silent vow. I would be strong, not just for my baby, but for myself. I would no longer be a victim of Evelyn's manipulations or Mark's inability to stand up to her. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would reclaim my life and my dignity. As the hospital came into view, a sense of resolve settled over me. This was not the end, but a new beginning. A beginning where I would stand tall, a mother ready to face the world with her child. Life, I had learned, was full of surprises, some more bitter than others. As I lay in the hospital bed, awaiting the birth of my child, my mind wandered back to the early days with Mark and his mother, Evelyn. I had always known that Evelyn held a special place in Mark's life. She was, after all, a single mother who had raised him alone. But what I hadn't anticipated was the depth of her influence over him, a hold so strong it often left me feeling like an outsider in my own marriage. Our first meeting had been a disaster. I had spent hours preparing, eager to make a good impression, but from the moment Evelyn laid eyes on me, I knew I was fighting a losing battle. "What kind of girl dyes her hair such an outrageous color?" she had sneered, her eyes scanning my carefully styled hair. I had felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment, a sinking feeling in my stomach. Mark had hastily dyed my hair a more conservative shade the night before, hoping to please his mother. But it seemed nothing I did was good enough for Evelyn. Mark had always excused his mother's behavior. "She's just set in her ways," he would say, or "she means well, deep down." But as time went on, her thinly veiled insults and constant interference in our lives became harder to ignore. I remembered one particular evening, a dinner that had started off pleasantly enough. We were celebrating Mark's promotion at work, a momentous occasion. But Evelyn's presence had cast a shadow over our celebration. "You must be so proud of Mark," I had said, trying to make conversation. "Proud? Of what?" Evelyn had replied, her voice dripping with disdain. "A promotion in a job he only got because of his father's connections. I suppose it's an achievement for someone with such limited ambitions." I had watched, stunned, as Mark said nothing, his eyes fixed on his plate. It was moments like these that chipped away at my respect for him, his inability to stand up to his mother slowly eroding the love I had once felt. As my pregnancy progressed, Evelyn's hold on Mark seemed to tighten. She would call him at all hours, demanding his attention for the most trivial matters. And Mark, ever the dutiful son, would always comply. "You don't understand, Anna," he would say whenever I protested. "She's all alone. She needs me." "But what about me? What about our baby?" These were questions I stopped asking, knowing I would never get the answers I sought. And now, as I prepared to bring our child into the world, I realized how much I had lost. My marriage had become a shadow of what it once was, consumed by the overbearing presence of a woman who saw me as nothing more than a threat to her control over her son. As the nurses bustled around me, preparing for the delivery, I felt a sense of loneliness wash over me. I was about to become a mother, a role I had always dreamed of, but in that moment I felt more alone than ever. And yet, amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was a flicker of hope. This child, my child, would be my salvation. A new beginning, a chance to break free from the chains of a toxic bond and start anew. As the first cries of my baby filled the room, I felt a strength rise within me, a a strength I didn't know I had. I was a mother now, and nothing would ever come between me and my child. As I held my newborn baby in my arms, feeling the tiny heartbeat against my chest, I reflected on the journey that had led me to this solitary but profound moment. The early days of my marriage to Mark, filled with love and shared dreams, now seemed like a distant mirage. After our wedding, I had entered our marriage with a heart full of hope. Mark and I had moved into a cozy apartment, a space we eagerly turned into our little haven. But as the days turned into months, the cracks began to show, widening with each passing moment. Mark's mother, Evelyn, became an ever-present shadow in our lives. Her calls were frequent, her demands increasingly unreasonable. Each time the phone rang, my heart sank, knowing it would pull Mark away from me, from us. I remember one evening, Mark and I had planned a quiet dinner at home. It was rare for us to have time alone, and I had spent the afternoon preparing his favorite dish. But just as we were about to sit down, his phone rang. It was Evelyn, and she needed him. Her car had broken down, and she insisted Mark come to help her, despite my suggestion to call a roadside assistance service. "Anna, she's my mother. I can't leave her stranded," Mark had said, his voice tinged with frustration. "But what about us, Mark? What about our plans?" I had asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer, just grabbed his coat and left, leaving me alone with the dinner I had so lovingly prepared. That night, I ate alone, the silence of the apartment a stark reminder of my growing loneliness. As my pregnancy progressed, I hoped it would bring Mark closer, that the prospect of our own family would shift his priorities. But the opposite happened. Evelyn's calls became more frequent, her reasons for needing Mark more absurd. And Mark, trapped in a cycle of guilt and obligation, never said no. I tried to talk to him, to make him see how his actions were affecting our marriage, but my words fell on deaf ears. "She's alone, Anna. She has no one else," he would say, his eyes pleading for understanding. But what about me? Wasn't I his family too? These were questions I asked myself every night as I lay in bed, Mark often absent, attending to his mother's latest crisis. And then, the day my water broke, the day that should have been the happiest of our lives, Mark chose Evelyn over me, over our baby. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than any of her harsh words or his broken promises. In the hospital, cradling my baby, I made a decision. I would no longer be a bystander in my own life, watching as others dictated my happiness. I would stand up for myself, for my child. Mark had made his choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. As I gazed into the innocent eyes of my baby, I felt a resolve harden within me. I would leave Mark and his toxic bond with his mother. I would start afresh, build a life for me and my child, a life free of shadows and manipulation. My baby's soft cooing brought me back to the present, a gentle reminder of the new path that lay ahead. A path filled with challenges, no doubt, but also with the promise of freedom and a new beginning. As the first light of dawn broke through the hospital window, casting a warm glow over us, I knew that this was the start of something new. A journey of resilience and self-discovery, a journey where I would no longer be just Anna, but a mother, strong and undeterred. The day I was abandoned by my husband on the way to the hospital, my world shifted irreversibly. Lying in the hospital bed, cradling my newborn, I couldn't help but replay that day over and over in my mind. It started like any other day, except for the undercurrent of excitement and anticipation. The baby was due any day now, and every moment felt charged with the promise of new life. But when my water broke, that excitement turned to fear and urgency. Mark's reaction was a mix of panic and concern, but it was quickly overshadowed by his mother's timely interruption, the phone call that changed everything. Evelyn needed him, and despite the critical nature of our situation, Mark chose to respond to her call. I remember feeling a mix of disbelief and despair as he explained, his voice strained, "Anna, I promised to help Mom. She's waiting for me." "But Mark, I'm in labor. We need to go to the hospital now." My voice was a mixture of pain and pleading. He hesitated, torn, but then his resolve faltered. "I'm sorry, Anna. I'll be back as soon as I can. Here, take this for a taxi." He pressed a $20 bill into my hand, a paltry sum that felt like an insult in the enormity of the moment. As he drove away, leaving me alone and vulnerable on the verge of childbirth, I realized the bitter truth. My husband, the man I had loved and trusted, had chosen his mother over his wife and unborn child. The taxi ride to the hospital was a blur of pain and tears. I was alone, save for the sympathetic driver who tried his best to comfort me. His kindness was a small solace in the overwhelming sense of betrayal and abandonment I felt. In the hospital, as I labored to bring our child into the world, the absence of my husband was a gaping wound. The pain of childbirth was nothing compared to the heartache of his betrayal. But in that moment of intense vulnerability, I found an inner strength I didn't know I possessed. I was doing this alone, but I was doing it. With every contraction, every push, I was not only bringing new life into the world, but also birthing a new version of myself. When my baby finally arrived, the sound of his first cry was the sweetest music I had ever heard. As I held him in my arms, I knew that our journey together would be filled with challenges, but also with immeasurable love and joy. Mark's absence in those crucial hours spoke louder than any words he had ever said. It was a clear message that his loyalties lay elsewhere, not with the family we had created together. As I gazed down at my baby, a sense of determination settled over me. I would not let Mark's choices define us. We would move forward, just the two of us, and create a life filled with the love and stability that my child deserved. That day, I not only became a mother, but also made a vow to myself and my baby. We would no longer be secondary in someone else's life. We would be our own priority, our own family, and nothing would ever come between that. The first rays of morning light streamed through the hospital window, casting a gentle glow on the tiny face of my son. As I watched him sleep peacefully in my arms, a sense of clarity washed over me. I had crossed a threshold, stepping into a world where I was no longer just Anna, but a mother determined to forge a path filled with love and security for my child. The events of the previous day, with Mark's unfathomable decision to abandon me in my hour of need, still stung with fresh pain. Yet, as I looked at my son, I knew that this pain was not just an end but a beginning too. A beginning of a life where I was the sole architect of my destiny. I remembered waking up, still groggy from the exhaustion of childbirth, to find the room empty. There was no sign of Mark. The realization that he had not been there to witness the birth of our child, to share in the joy and awe of this miracle, was a sobering reminder of the reality I faced. As the morning progressed, my resolve strengthened. I knew I had to make decisions, not just for myself, but for the tiny life that depended on me. The first was to move out of the home I shared with Mark, and to seek the comfort and support of my own family. When Mark finally arrived, late in the afternoon, his face etched with concern and guilt, it was too late. The sight of him, once a source of comfort, now only brought a sense of betrayal. "Anna, I'm so sorry. I should have been here," he began, his voice trembling. But I cut him off, my own voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Mark, you made your choice, and now I've made mine. I can't trust you to be there for us, not when it truly matters." The hurt in his eyes was evident, but the time for apologies and excuses had passed. As he looked at our son, a flicker of longing crossed his face, but I knew that longing was not enough. Can I hold him?" Mark asked hesitantly. I hesitated, torn between the desire to let him bond with his son and the need to protect my child from future hurt. But in the end, I handed our son to him, watching as Mark held him with a tenderness that contrasted sharply with his earlier abandonment. After a few moments, I took my son back, my decision firm. "Mark, I'll be going to my parents' house. We need space and time to figure things out." Mark nodded, the realization of the gravity of the situation dawning on him. "I understand. I'll give you whatever space you need." As I made arrangements for my discharge and subsequent move, I felt a sense of empowerment. I was taking control of my life, making choices that were right for me and my son. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it head on. Leaving the hospital that day, with my son cradled in my arms, I stepped into the crisp air, a sense of freedom enveloping me. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: I was not alone. I had my son, and together we would navigate this new world, a world where we were each other's priority. The days following my discharge from the hospital were a blend of overwhelming love for my son and the stark reality of my new life. Moving in with my parents brought a much-needed sense of security and support. As I navigated the uncharted waters of motherhood, their presence was a comforting constant in the turbulence of my emotional upheaval. Mark's absence in our lives was palpable, but with each passing day, I grew more resolute in my decision. The breach of trust and his subsequent failure to prioritize our family were wounds too deep to simply heal with time and apologies. However, the finality of our separation brought its own set of challenges. I initiated divorce proceedings, a decision that was as painful as it was necessary. Mark was stunned, his initial disbelief giving way to a reluctant acceptance. The man who had once vowed to stand by me in sickness and in health now stood at a distance, a silent spectator to the dissolution of our marriage. The legal process was tedious, but amid the paperwork and meetings, I found a strength I didn't know I had. I was not just fighting for myself, but for my son, too. The settlement included a claim for damages, a recognition of the emotional and physical toll Mark's actions had taken on me, particularly during the vulnerable period of my pregnancy. As I juggled the demands of legal battles and new motherhood, word of our separation began to spread. Mark's mother, Evelyn, tried to reach out to me, but I firmly kept my distance. The toxic bond she shared with Mark had been a major catalyst in our downfall, and I was determined to shield myself and my son from further manipulation. In the midst of this, karma seemed to find its way to Mark. His reputation, once that of a loving husband and doting father, was now tarnished. His colleagues and friends who had once admired his commitment to his family now viewed him with a mix of pity and disdain. The man who had prided himself on his familial values had fallen from grace, and the community's judgment was swift and unforgiving. As for me, I found solace in the little moments with my son. His first smile, the way his tiny fingers wrapped around mine, the soft coos as he drifted to sleep. These were the joys that filled my days and gave me the strength to keep moving forward. Slowly but surely, I began to rebuild my life. My parents, ever supportive, were my pillars of strength, and my son was my beacon of hope. The journey was not easy, but it was filled with small victories and immense growth. Looking back, I realized how far I had come, from a wife overshadowed by the influence of a controlling mother-in-law to a single mother standing on her own 2 feet. The transformation was nothing short of remarkable. And as I lay my son down to sleep each night, I whispered promises of a better future, a future where we were not defined by the past, but shaped by the love and resilience that had brought us this far. Years have passed since the day I made the decision to walk away from a marriage that had become a shadow of what it once promised. As I sit in the quiet of my parents' garden watching my son play, his laughter a balm to my soul, I reflect on the journey that brought us here. The path was not easy. There were moments of doubt, nights filled with tears, and days when the weight of single motherhood felt overwhelming. But each challenge also brought with it a lesson in strength, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Mark, once a central figure in my life, now seemed like a distant memory. His attempts to reconcile, initially frequent and desperate, had slowly dwindled over time. The last I heard, he had moved to another city, a consequence of the life he had chosen. His mother, Evelyn, remained a part of his life, but their bond, once the cause of so much pain in mine, was no longer my concern. My son, now a vibrant and curious little boy, was the source of my strength. His presence reminded me daily of the decision I made, not just for myself, but for him. A decision to break free from a toxic environment and provide him with a life filled with love, stability, and the freedom to grow. My parents, ever supportive, had been my rock through it all. They had embraced their roles as grandparents with a love and dedication that filled our home with warmth. Their support had been invaluable, giving me the space and strength to find my footing as a single mother. As I watched my son, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in the person I had become. The journey had reshaped me, not just as a mother but as an individual. I had found a sense of purpose, a clarity that only comes from facing and overcoming life's trials. Life, I realized, is a tapestry of experiences, each thread woven with moments of joy and sorrow, victories and defeats. My story was no different. It was a story of love lost and found, of betrayal and forgiveness, of falling down and rising up stronger. In this moment of reflection, I knew that the road ahead would have its own set of challenges. but I also knew that I was no longer the woman who once felt helpless in the face of adversity. I was stronger, wiser, and more resilient. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the garden, I called out to my son. He ran to me, his face alight with the simple joy of childhood. And in his embrace, I found not just the love of a child, but the promise of a future filled with hope and endless possibilities. Life had come full circle, and as I held my son close, I knew that this was just the beginning. A beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where we were the protagonists of our own story, a story of triumph and resilience.
Watching my husband berate me with an ugliness I had never seen before, I realized my aunt's concerns had come true. Despite thinking we were fine, my husband had changed because of money. Seeing him like this, I knew I couldn't continue our marriage. My name is Gina. I'm a typical housewife in her 40s. I've been married to James for 16 years, and we have 2 daughters, 14-year-old Hannah and 12-year-old Mia. We were leading a happy, peaceful, albeit ordinary, life. Everything changed immediately after the 49th day following my mother's death. My father had passed away last year, and my mother had been living alone in her home. An hour's train ride from ours. My parents were very close, so after my father's death, my mother lost her spirit and soon passed away, after falling ill shortly after his 49th day memorial. Reeling from the loss of both parents in quick succession, I was still trying to process everything when my aunt called. She worked at an insurance company and informed me that I was the beneficiary of my mother's life insurance and needed to proceed with the claim. My aunt had convinced my parents to take out life insurance years ago to meet her sales quotas. When my father died, I was aware of the insurance, but had forgotten about it amidst my mother's illness. The payout was $500,000, which overwhelmed me, but my husband was thrilled. $500,000? That's incredible. Yeah, I was surprised too. While I was more perplexed, my husband seemed delighted. I watched my husband with mixed feelings. It's money your mother left behind. We have to use it wisely. Right, but she just passed away. I can't think of using it for anything right now. I understand. We'll wait until you're ready, Gina. Noticing the disconnect between our feelings, my husband appeared uneasy. After that, he didn't mention the life insurance, and inwardly, I felt relieved. However, something unexpected happened. When the sorting of my mother's estate began, it was discovered that she had over $500,000 in savings. Wondering if my aunt might know something about it, I contacted her. She suggested that the $500,000 might be from my father's life insurance. Both of my parents were insured under the same policy, and when my father passed away, my mother had received $500,000 but apparently had not spent any of it. The entire amount was still there. Overwhelmed by such a large sum, my aunt expressed her concern. My aunt has worked at an insurance company for many years, so she has seen how inheritances and life insurance payouts can cause disputes among family members or disrupt lives when large sums of money are suddenly obtained. She advised me to carefully consider whom to tell about the inheritance and whom to keep in the dark. Listening to her, I began to feel more composed. Though $1 million is a substantial amount, I resolved to be cautious so that this money wouldn't derail my or my family's life. I decided to consult with my husband first. I had been anxious about his recent behavior, but he listened calmly to what I had to say, which reassured me initially. However, I slowly began to notice that his behavior was becoming increasingly strange. Maybe I should quit my job? What are you talking about? We have $1 million now, we could live without working, right? I feel like asking him, what are you talking about? Sure, $1 million is a lot of money. However, it's not enough for us, a couple in our 30s with 2 daughters, to live on without working in the future. My husband saw my reaction and said, "Just kidding," and didn't quit his job. But afterward, he kept saying things like, "Let's move to a bigger house or let's buy a new car." And suddenly asked our 6th grade daughter, "Don't you want to try for middle school exams?" My daughter, who had never been told such things before, was confused. While I was thinking we needed to talk, my husband went ahead and bought our 14-year-old daughter a designer wallet. That was popular among teenagers and promoted by influencers, costing $500. Although she had said she wanted it, both my husband and I had said no. She seemed to accept it as just making a casual remark, and didn't think she would actually get it. However, he bought it anyway. My daughter seemed more bewildered than happy, seeing my husband's flippant attitude since getting the $1 million. I decided we needed a serious conversation. Stop suddenly bringing up middle school exams for Mia and buying unnecessary things. Why not? I was thinking of Mia when I said it. And the wallet isn't unnecessary, Hannah wanted it, right? And neither the car nor the house is unnecessary. Even if you talk about middle school exams in the fall of 6th grade. It's only bewildering. Mia has already visited the club and promised her friends they would join the brass band. Hannah doesn't need a wallet that costs $500. And didn't we just buy a car 2 years ago? Our house is fine as it is. James seemed eager to spend the money since we had it, wanting to upgrade our lifestyle. The property listings he brought all had rents over $10,000. Our annual income hasn't reached $1 million. We just happened to come into a large sum of money. If we followed his ideas, the money would be gone in no time. I was determined not to change our standard of living. But James just couldn't understand my feelings. With $1 million, we can afford to spend a little. I would agree if it were after 10 years of using the car, or if our daughter actually wanted to take middle school exams. But this is different. If we spend money without planning, $1 million will disappear quickly. There's no way $1 million would just disappear, Gina. You're exaggerating. I was exasperated by my overly carefree husband's remarks. I often get told I'm too serious, and while I found his optimism charming, this time it was just too much. You brought home listings for a place with a rent of $10,000, right? That's $120,000 a year. In 8 years, that alone would eat up $1 million. So what should we do with the $1 million? Just leave it untouched? I'm not saying we shouldn't use it, but it's important money left by my parents. And I want to use it carefully. I promised to use the money for our family and to always consult with my husband before spending, telling him I didn't want to think about it any further right now. He seemed to understand and didn't say anything more. However, about a week after our conversation, he started asking, "Have you decided how to use the money? What will we use it for?" I felt sad realizing he hadn't understood my feelings at all. It's only been a week since we talked. I can't decide so suddenly. So how long do I have to wait? You're being too cautious, Gina. It's not about being too cautious. I just don't want this sudden money to disrupt our lives. When he realized I wasn't planning to spend the money soon, he seemed displeased. He kept pestering me, "Are you really not going to use it? How about investing?" I felt stressed by his attitude and started responding nonchalantly. However, he didn't like my casual responses and nearly stopped talking to me altogether. I started to regret inheriting the estate, even considering donating it, when one day, James came home in a good mood. Sitting down, he shocked me with his news. "I bought a house for us to live with my father and sister. We'll move when it's finished." "What are you talking about? A house to live with your father and sister?" I didn't hear anything about this. "Well, I'm telling you now." He said it casually, but I was filled with disbelief. That money was legally mine, not his. I never intended to use it solely for myself. But for him to spend it without my consent was unacceptable. Additionally, I had asked my husband to keep quiet about my inheritance from his parents, as I find them difficult to deal with. They have made intolerable comments to me. A mother of daughters only, saying things like, "You're not a complete mother unless you have a son," or describing my mother, who passed away shortly after my father, as a woman who could only depend on a man. My husband is well aware of this. His sister, who still lives at home and follows idols, does not do household chores and doesn't contribute financially to the household. Living with his parents and sister would clearly be a struggle, and I didn't see it benefiting our daughters. I rushed to check the bank account where the inheritance was, but the passbook that should have been there was missing. A chill went through me as I realized James had indeed spent the money without my permission. Returning to where James was, he was smiling. Seeing that, I felt an indescribable fear. After 14 years of marriage, he seemed like a stranger. "You've always said you wanted to use it meaningfully for the family. Living with my mom will add people to help with the kids. And if we pay for the house in one go, we won't have to pay rent ever again. It's a good use of the money, right, for me, you, and the kids? If it was a good use, why didn't you consult me first? Why did you take the passbook on your own? Don't make it sound so bad. What's yours is mine, right?" Hearing his words, I felt my affection for him cooling rapidly. I realized that no matter what I said, it wouldn't get through to him. Enough already. That was my inheritance, my money. You had no right to use it without my permission. Of course, that's your true feeling. It was right of me to take the passbook. You never intended to let me use the money, did you? You planned to keep it all for yourself. James yelled at me with an intensity one had never seen before. I wondered how things had gotten to this point. But it was the moment I realized I could no longer continue with this man. "If you oppose living with my parents, then let's get a divorce." "Fine. Let's divorce." James seemed to have been bluffing, not truly intending to go through with it. When I easily agreed to the divorce, he appeared to be shaken. "Are you really okay with that?" "Divorce, really?" "Yes, I'm fine with it. If we divorce, you won't be able to live in the house that's being built. Are you okay with that?" I had no problem with not living in a 3-generation household with his parents and sister. Besides, a question had occurred to me. James had claimed he bought a house, but I suspected it might be a lie. "Are you sure you're okay with this? You might regret it." "What? Regret? There's no way I'll regret this," James said confidently. Later, he said, "I can't live with you anymore." Packed his bags and left the house. The next morning, as soon as the bank opened, I went to check the account and found that all the money was still there. Indeed, James's claim that he had already bought the house was a lie. Despite having the passbook, I had suspected that he couldn't withdraw such a large amount from my account without my consent. I reported the loss of the passbook and requested the bank to temporarily suspend the account and reissue a new passbook. The divorce proceedings concerning property division and child support were progressing smoothly without much dispute. However, a week after James left, he called me in a desperate tone. "Gina, help me." "What? What's going on all of a sudden?" "Help me." James seemed to be panicking, and no matter what I asked, he just repeated, "Help me." Confused, the call was then taken over by a man. According to him, someone at the bank had contacted the police after seeing a man trying to withdraw money with a passbook under an account that had been suspended. The bank staff had been suspicious because the man also had a power of attorney document which wasn't supposed to be there without the account holder's presence. As a result, James was being questioned by the police inside the bank. I was shocked that James would do such a thing, even though we were planning to divorce. The man I knew wouldn't do something like this, but it seemed he had been driven mad by money. I was asked to come in for more details, so I rushed over. At that moment, I contacted my brother-in-law, who is a very competent lawyer. James had always been complexed by him, getting upset whenever I talked to my brother-in-law, who, unlike the rest of his family, had little interaction with them despite living nearby. Reluctantly, I had to ask for his help as he was the only one I could rely on. My brother-in-law answered the phone immediately. "Gina? It's been a while, what's going on?" "Brother, I'm sorry to call suddenly. I'm in a bit of trouble." I briefly explained the situation, and my brother-in-law believed everything while being surprised. He said he would come to the bank right away. "Gina, I'm truly sorry about our family." "No, I'm sorry for the sudden call. Don't worry about it. It's good that you called." When I arrived at the bank, I was surrounded by the bank employee who had handled the account suspension and police officers. James looked diminished and relieved when he saw me, coming over with tears in his eyes. "Gina, help me. If this continues, I'll be arrested. Tell them that we agreed to withdraw the money as a couple." James pleaded pitifully. "The passbook was taken without my consent. The account's funds were not his to claim. I had no recollection of writing a power of attorney, and such a document would normally require my signature. When I asked the bank, they mentioned that my signature was written on the power of attorney. The forgery was so poorly done that I couldn't help but laugh. Explaining the situation as it actually happened would certainly lead to my husband's arrest. When the police officer asked, "Is this your husband?" I wanted to say no, but unfortunately, we were still legally married. I was taken to a separate room to explain the situation in detail. Although I felt sorry for causing trouble, both the police and the bank staff sympathized with me. They told me that my husband could be charged for forging the power of attorney. But thinking of my daughters, I chose not to file a complaint. As I was heading back to where my husband was, I heard him shout, "Why are you here?" When I approached, he yelled at me, "Gina, did you call him? Why did you bring such a guy here? Are you trying to harass me? The only one harassing here is you. You took the passbook and tried to withdraw money without permission, which is not acceptable even if the other party is your wife. Shut up. It's none of your business." His outburst was so intense that a police officer had to intervene. However, James's agitation didn't subside. "You must have been having an affair with my brother. You planned to use the inheritance with him, didn't you?" "That's not true. I don't believe you. I've been deceived." Despite the lack of any factual basis for his accusations, and knowing that my brother-in-law, who has been happily married for 20 years, would never do such a thing, James refused to believe it. "Officer, I am the victim here. I've been deceived. Enough. You're the one who did something that could have gotten you arrested. And now you're trying to shift the blame without even apologizing." Whether it was the scolding from my brother-in-law or the fear of being handed over to the police, James calmed down. After finalizing our discussions about child support, I presented him with the divorce papers. "Please don't involve yourself with me or our daughters ever again. Whatever you do from now on is none of my concern. And I don't want to be called as your wife anymore." Facing cold looks from me, my brother-in-law, the bank staff, and the police officers, James quietly signed the divorce papers. Afterwards, my brother-in-law said, "I'll take responsibility for getting him home." I submitted the divorce papers to the city hall right away, and our divorce was finalized. Later, it came to light that my ex-husband had accrued a significant amount of debt. He had bragged in a nightclub that he had come into $1 million and spent several thousands of dollars in a single day, planning to repay the debt with the inheritance, which, of course, he never received, leaving only the debt behind. His parents, who had been expecting to live in a luxurious mansion worth $1 million, were furious when the plan fell through and disparaged him as useless. They tried to contact me, but my brother-in-law intervened. Now, I have moved and started a new life with my daughters, who have sensed that their father was acting strangely, and have expressed no desire to see him. My ex-husband, after being rebuked by his parents and counseled by my brother-in-law, seems to have regained his senses and has been consistently sending child support payments. I hope that if my daughters ever wish to see him again, I can make that possible.